Okay. The scene opens this evening in the studio apartment of Stefan Braunfiedler, above the, well, among the blue collar citizens of New Sarum, a very popular family oriented restaurant. He sits at his workbench contemplating the work that he's already gotten started on. He looks at the smaller of the two crystals, puts on a pair of powderless rubber gloves so that he's, you know, so that nothing on his hands contaminates the material, so to speak. Though it may not be as necessary given his state, that the state he's lived with or lived in for, 10, almost 11 years now. Um, he sets aside the larger piece of crystal that he hasn't touched. Looks at the smaller. He looks at the carved shape, the two heart-like valves, two openings at the top. He pulls out some smaller pieces of crystal and begins to try to shape them down a little bit in order to put them in as plugs, basically, and pull some more or less semi-special adhesive, some very quick drying stuff, very close to himself. And as he begins to properly shape the plugs, make a wits craft. Oh, wow. No sooner does that he begins to shape a couple really small pieces of crystal and kind of get them down to about, you know, just under 2 millimeters to be able to plug them. Then he sets the two pieces down side by side on his mat. Um, very, very pleased with himself, very much now in the groove of the whole thing. And I'll go ahead and make a nightmare roll for night. And he has awoken. No wonder he's doing so well. He has had the most restful sleep, the least nightmare-ridden sleep tonight. So as he's now really focused on his work, he smiles to himself. He celebrates. It's all in his head. His subconscious, his psyche is just reveling in the joy of the continuation of this fine work that he hopes to complete. He knows that this will be a testament to his skill, another testament to his skill. Um, he Stefan um, begins to kind of take a rock blanket a little bit, and he uses it, or he kind of chips away some of the odd ends, mostly at the bottom of the piece opposite, and just begins to kind of smooth it down and kind of occasionally carefully chipping off excess uneven portions of the crystal as he continues his work. And indeed, he is extremely focused this evening. So much that, just as soon as he starts, what it seems to him, he looks up at a wall clock and realizes, he's been working for about 30-45 minutes. He's not sure exactly when he started, but somewhere around that. And he finally gets the crystal, he gets the odd ends shaped off. He uses the rock blanket to smooth out the edges of the piece and sets it back down for a moment, going to grab the vial. Walking over to his other workbench, he grabs a small amount of anticoagulant, and he doesn't have the silver dust, but he quickly reaches back over and he pulls out another really tiny piece of quartz, and he places it into a small metal can. It's the tiny little metal container, and he begins to crush it down, trying to powder it because it does have light refractive properties. And he crushes and crushes. Eventually, he gets a very fine crystalline powder. He pulls out another vial and he puts a small amount of the crystal powder in and sets the other container down. Goes for a small eyedropper. Pulling a vial rack, he places the prepped vial with the dust, and he takes his eyedropper and carefully makes a small measured amount of the blood, dropping it in, sets the eyedropper down, caps the blood back. It's about 2 drops of blood, and he takes just the smallest measured amount of anticoagulant. Into it. And he caps it and just kind of lightly shakes around the substance. The real trick is getting it into the vessel. He grabs an eyedropper that has an even smaller hole at the end, about 1.5 millimeters, and he sets that prepped vial down, moving the one that still has about a drop of blood. He grabs it up with his smaller eyedropper, walks back over to his primary workbench and sets it down. He sets the eyedropper on the vial, on the vial holder, basically, and he picks up the crystal in one hand and the vial in the other, and he takes the blood into the blood, crystal, and anticoagulant mixture, and he takes it up into the micro eyedropper and places it into one of the holes of the crystal and starts to slowly drip. His hands begin to shake a little bit, but he 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 focuses a little bit and tries to steel his nerves as he begins to, or as he slides the tip of the eyedropper in and begins to drip it slowly until the blood begins to drip into the chambers around and come back up to the other valve, essentially. And once the eyedropper is clear, he takes it out and sets it back into the now empty vial, and he kind of tilts it a little bit to the side, careful not to let the eyedropper, and picks up his small tube of adhesive, and just knowing this is going to dry crystal clear, he just drips a tiny drop very quickly into the two holes, and then grabbing for the plugs, he slides it in, getting each of the two plugs in the effective valves of the human heart shape, carving inside this crystal structure. It's perfectly flush. In there, as he pulls over a small, basically like something designed to hold an egg or something smaller, he basically sits the tiny egg-shaped crystal, picking up the unused crystal, putting it back into his box, and closing it. He sets it into the small cup on his velvet mat and waits for it to dry. The total amount of successes on this, effectively the total amount of successes on the piece are, for system, are 6, 9, 14 successes on it. He starts to kind of put away some of his tools, taking the eyedropper, setting it into the now empty but blood-stained vial, kind of sets that little vial rack aside, getting up, setting it back onto a smaller work table, and he looks at the piece, grabs for a small flashlight, and just kind of runs it past the crystal. And indeed, there is some semblance. The blood, which has had its volume slightly increased by the tiniest amount of anticoagulant to keep it, well, hopefully to keep it from coagulating. Hopefully the sealant keeps the air from keeps any additional air from getting to the blood and causing it to dry. It stays moist and glistening, the blood filling the chamber all the way around. And indeed, when the light passes over, or even through the blood, he sees shimmers that could give the optical illusion of flowing. shuts the flashlight off, and sets it back into a tool rack on his workbench. And he sits in front of the piece and smiles to himself. Thinks, hopefully the blood will not coagulate. Hopefully the vitality, the life in the VTMYTE will be sustained. The spirit of my work will keep this precious liquid intact. Hopefully it will stand as a testament to my skill. And Stefan just kind of sits back, just ever so slightly, just kind of sits casually on his bench, looking to his watch and realizing that he needs to finish, or he needs to continue getting ready to head out for work so that he's there at least 20 minutes before 10. After a little bit of sitting and admiring the work, realizing that it didn't quite come out as he had planned, but it still came out as a testament to his skill. He gets up, he continues to get ready for work tonight, and right before he closes the door to his studio apartment, having everything he needs to head to work, he looks back at the small crystal, smaller than what he had described, but he looks back at it, smiles, closes the door, locking it behind him, and heads off into the night to the last resort where he works.